Saltbox is a Staffordshire-based Christian organisation that works with several vulnerable communities in the Stoke-on-Trent area. Paul Marriott spoke to the Chief Executive, Lloyd Cooke, about the work they do and how relevant it is in the modern world.
So I'm the Chief Executive of Saltbox. Saltbox is a Christian charity which was established in the 1980s. Initially to provide help and support for churches and Christians to help develop their work and their ministries. And over the years, we've become an organiser of many United Christian events, often with an emphasis on United celebrations or prayer, praying for the city, praying for the needs of an area, but also training events and the like. But alongside our work of trying to bring Christians together in terms of unity and prayer and mission, we've also developed in the last 20 years a series of services for vulnerable adults. So we run a project for ex-offenders, we run a project for vulnerable elderly people, and we also run a debt advice project which works with our citywide food bank.
Yeah, I spotted you do many different things for many parts of the community. What would you say is your main focus of work?
Well, our main focus is really twofold. One is still our emphasis on supporting the body of Christ, supporting individual Christians, helping the church to be more effective, and bringing the church together in unity, bringing leaders together for leaders' gatherings. So that is still a main emphasis of what we do. But again, the other side is basically social action. It's Christian action, is love in action, helping some very needy people in our communities.
So would you say you're doing the work which the authorities would do had they could afford it, or is what you do in addition to what they do? Are you complementary to them, or how does it work together?
It is complementary. In an ideal world, if local authorities, if governments had enough money, then everyone would be taken care of. But we're not in an ideal world, and therefore there will always be more need in terms of people's need than there is that the government can provide help for. And that's where charities, the voluntary community sector and churches, faith groups come in. So we're very much complementary. So we are working alongside other partners. So our ex-offender project works with probation and police. Our telephone befriending service for elderly people works alongside social services and the NHS. And our debt advice services works alongside organisations like Citizens Advice Bureau and the City Council in terms of their advice given to people in financial need. So it is a partnership, and it's really important that I think church, faith groups and the wider voluntary sector are recognised to be, which they are, I believe, credible partners in taking care of people in communities.
Over the years, how has that changed? How's what you do provide and what services you provide? How has that evolved with the changing world of society and the city and everything like that? How has it all changed over the years from where you started with?
Well, we've become more professional, that's for sure. We've certainly grown larger. So originally it was 3 members of staff for many years. Now we have 35 staff. It means that our policies and procedures have to be spot on. So we are more professional. We have a strong view on the importance of safeguarding. And again, we're working in partnership. In the early days of Saltbox, our focus was working with churches, Christians, ministries. These days, whilst we're still doing that, much of our time is working with that wider statutory sector, with local authorities, with the NHS, with police. So I think we've matured. I think we're certainly more professional. I think we understand what it means to have to provide a Christian response to need in a way that secular authorities can work with.
People listening to this from from all over the diocese. Are you primarily a Stoke-on-Trent-based organisation?
We are. So most of our services are provided for people in Stoke-on-Trent or North Staffordshire. But very often we're asked to advise people in the county and certainly nationally and often internationally as well. So what Saltbox provides is often a model and some good examples which other people take on board. So we've been very heavily involved over many years with encouraging citywide prayer. That emphasis takes me all over the UK as increasingly Christians recognise their call and responsibility, not just to pray for the church and its mission, but to pray for its community. But we're well known in Stoke-on-Trent and North Staffordshire, but our influence certainly goes beyond into the county and further into the nation.
Now, this service we provide is primarily aimed at people who are blind and partially sighted, not exclusively, but people listen from all over the world on the internet. But do you focus on those communities as well?
Only as they relate to the services we provide. So, for example, we will have people who've got sight impairment, who are elderly, who take advantage of our telephone befriending service. So if you're an older person and you've got a sight problem, then we work with you, and our volunteers will phone you to check you're okay. Our staff will visit you to make sure that everything's fine. Yes, we do, as long as it's within the remit of either being an ex-offender. I'm not sure how many of your listeners will be ex-offenders, but if they were, we'd help them. Or if they felt lonely and isolated, or if they had debt issues, we'd give them help and support.
So, initially, how do people get in touch with you? Do they come to you, or are they referred through social services?
Oh, it's a whole mix of things. So if you're an ex-offender, you could get signposted through prison or probation or the police. Very often they self-refer. If you're an older person, it can be social services, it can be the NHS, it can be your local church, it can be a neighbour who's just concerned for their elderly relative or friend who says, would you give them a call, would you check they're okay? When it comes to our debt advice works through Stoke-on-Trent Food Bank. We have 17 outlets for Stoke-on-Trent Food Bank, so it's quite large, and our staff and volunteers visit there regularly and engage with people who come along for food.
One thing I've noticed is, and I don't know if you can help with this, in Stoke-on-Trent there's many very active Christian charities. There's yourselves, there's Cross Rhythms, there's UCB, for example, that I know of. There's many others too. What is it about Stoke-on-Trent that makes it such a cauldron of Christian activity, do you think?
Well, you're right. We have lots of ministries. And you've named a couple, but we have Sanctus working with refugees, asylum seekers. We have Warp Ministries. That's another ministry working with ex-offenders. We have things like the Rough and Ruby Rooms, which work with young people and have a brilliant social enterprise.
The Rough and Ruby Rooms.
Yeah,
that's a great name.
It is, and it has an outstanding unit in our Pottery Shopping Centre. You'd find them there, and you would just think that it was one of the shops there. But in fact, it's a charity run by Christians, and the aim is to engage with young people who are struggling. So we have lots of ministries. I think, to be honest, as I've travelled the UK, I think there are lots of towns and cities who have a number of Christian ministries. It would be nice to think that somehow Stoke-on-Trent is bucking the trend, but I think that lots of towns and cities have some brilliant projects working either through churches or set up as ministries in their own right. Stoke's always been a creative place, so people listening might be aware that Stoke-on-Trent is known as the Potteries. So we are still really the heart of ceramics in the UK and internationally, and that makes us a very creative bunch of people. So perhaps that's influencing Christians as well to think creatively about how they provide services for people in their communities.
I suppose also it helps for people to see that the work of the church is not just abstract, something that people go to on a Sunday, but is there all the time in their daily lives, everything they do.
Yeah, one of the things that we helped to pioneer back in the early noughties, back in 2003 and 4, was the use of faith action audits. So we carried out our first one there. And faith action audits basically are asking people of faith, what do you do for your community? What projects do you do? And so we contacted all the faith groups we could think of and came across, and we put all the results together It meant that in our city, which is a city of about 250,000 people, about 500 community projects are provided every week by local churches, Christian ministries and others. That involves 2,000 or 3,000 volunteers. It supports tens of thousands of people in need. What that helped to do was it helped to give a really clear narrative to people like the NHS, the local council, the police, to say, people of faith, churches and the like, they're not just about Sunday services and being nice to people. They're actually providing some really significant care in the community. And that evidence has gone a long way to opening the eyes of people who may not be people of faith, but suddenly realised, gosh, the church is still alive and well, and it's still doing lots of work. And I'm pleased to say that faith action audits have been carried out all over the UK and increasingly across the world. And what they do is they not only highlight what faith is doing, but it provides a place of engagement and conversation between leaders of faith and local authorities and city councils and the like, to say, how can we work better together?
And I guess also it shows that the work of the church and the teaching of the church is relevant in today's modern world.
Absolutely. Whilst we have a gospel to proclaim, which is good news, Jesus was very clear when he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor, release to the captives. And whenever you hear Jesus speaking, there is always an emphasis upon caring for the needy. And as we read Scripture, very often, especially in the Old Testament, it's a faith which requires us to take care of the widows, the orphans, the foreigners, which is very much in vogue as an issue in the UK. And so our faith isn't just a personal faith, and it's not just a Sunday faith. It has to be a faith which takes care of people, because that's what the Bible commands. And it's interesting that in these days, when I think lots of people outside the church will think that the church has had its day, it's declining, the church is still providing, and Christian ministries are still providing so much valuable care in the communities to those in need.
On a day-to-day level, how do you sustain yourselves? How do you pay for premises bills, things like that?
Well, we charge exorbitant rates to people who interview us. I'm only joking, and for those who are listening, that was a joke, and this is free. It's often very difficult, but each of our projects, we have a target of how we're going to raise the money. Some of it comes through grants or commissioned work through the NHS or probation service. With our ex-offender work, we manage a lot of houses, so we get money from housing benefit. But we have a full-time fundraiser who is often writing bids for us and is applying for grants for us. So we have multiple funding streams. We're not reliant upon one. We often look for gifts, and we ask for gifts from Christians, from national Christian ministries. So it's a real varied menu of gifts, commissioned work, projects and fundraising.
It must be hard in this day and age to make ends meet. Is it getting harder, or is it not getting harder? How is it working?
Well, I chair the Stoke-on-Trent's voluntary sector forum. So I'm able to work with a whole host of voluntary sector charities and organisations. And certainly the last 10 years with the austerity cuts have been really hard for voluntary and community sector organisations and charities. Local authorities often have had their funding cut by about 50% in the last 10 years. And that means there's just less money to go around. So a number of charities have closed, which is sad. Others have had to try and reinvent themselves, become smaller, slicker. Some have had to come together. So it's as tough now as it's ever been. I think probably for many charities, I guess they're hoping that they have ridden out the worst times. And there's a hope that perhaps in the future, if there was a slackening of austerity, then there might be more funding available. But let's be honest, it's a tough ask running a charity. I often liken it to walking up a down escalator. So if you imagine an escalator, try walking up the down one. That's what it's like running an organisation, raising funds, trying to keep the show on the road.
And going forward, looking into the future, how do you see your work evolving with increasing budget constraints and things like that? How is it going to change the work you do over the coming years?
Well, our hope is, and this might sound odd when times of austerity, when funding is tight, our hope is that we're going to grow. We've never had as many staff as we have now, 35 staff. We've never done as much work as we're doing now. So we're hoping that even though funding is difficult, that the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, that people will see the fruit of what we do. They'll recognise the importance of working with needy people, and they will say, well, whilst things are tight, Saltbox and organisations like Saltbox are doing such good work, we must have them, and we must have more of them. So we're still praying that we're going to grow. We're in Stoke-on-Trent. I spend a lot of time advising people nationally. We would like to see our services grow into the rest of Staffordshire. So for those of your listeners who like praying, then we'd say, please pray that our work will increase and that we can provide more services to needy people across Staffordshire and hopefully beyond.
And how do people get in touch with you, just as a final comment?
We have a super website, so www.saltbox, S-A-L-T-B-O-X, saltbox.org.uk. On there you will find all about our projects, and most people go on because there's a particular interest they have, whether it's prayer, unity, older people, debt, and you'll be able to follow the links. You'll be able to watch some videos, listen to some stories from people who've been helped. There's also then an opportunity to leave a message, and we'll do our best to get back to people as soon as we can.